Hi there, I'm Sara Zarrella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know direct from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning, while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day where you say, I do. After photographing for the past 18 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you'll find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point, with a fresh, honest take about the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So I just realized that Dan and I have never sat and had a nice conversation with you all about photography. This entire time, we've been talking with guests and giving you secrets and tips and tricks and behind-the-scenes information, but never once have we talked about photography. So Dan, who, as you know, is the producer of the show, but also is going to be my co-host today, we are going to talk to you about first looks and whether you should have a first look or not. And I think what we're going to do is we've decided that we're going to give you guys periodically an episode about photography, but each episode is going to be themed. So today's episode is whether or not you should have a first look. So welcome, Dan.
So, Sarah, first off, what is a first look? Why don't you explain what a first look is?
Oh, gosh, you're putting me right on the spot, Dan.
Webster's Dictionary defines first look as...
Fair. What does a Webster Dictionary define first look as? Why don't you Google that when I explain my definition of first look?
I was going to say verb, but that's not right. Yeah.
So, basically, for those people who don't know, a first look / could be also be said maybe like a reveal is whether or not you are going to see your spouse to be before the ceremony or not. So
it kind of flips up the timeline because it's basically getting ready, then first look, then ceremony, instead of getting ready, ceremony, and then pictures, and then, cocktail hour kind of thing.
Right. So basically a traditional wedding would be that the couple does not see each other prior to the time that they say I do. With a first look, like you said, you're flipping the timeline. You are then seeing each other right before your ceremony. And in essence, the reason why you're doing that is to actually get your photos taken prior. So therefore, on a traditional ceremony / wedding, you are usually getting married, then you're doing your pictures while your guests have a cocktail, and then you're joining your guests at intros and at your reception. Where with a first look, you are, like you said, flipping the timeline. So in essence, you're getting ready, doing a first look, having a ceremony, going to cocktail hour, and then going to your reception. So that's my definition. I don't know what Webster's definition is.
We'll have to look up that later. Put that in the show notes.
We'll put that in the show notes for the listeners. If Webster even has a first look in there, we're going to have to check that out.
We'll check it out.
But, honestly, though, so one of the things that when people call us up and we're talking to them for the first initial appointment on the phone, is usually what we do, our first initials is on the phone. One of the first questions I always get is whether or not couples are going to do a first look. Also, they're asking me, like, what they think. And then there's couples who already made up their mind. Like, I'll literally say, they'll say to me, we are definitely doing a first look because I want to join cocktail hour. Or they will say, we are definitely not doing it.
Yeah, I feel like people know when they're not going to do it. It's usually like if the church service is like very specific, to them. A lot of times if it's like, a church wedding, somebody has that sort of relationship with their, spirituality or something like that. It's kind of important for them to not do a first look. And there's upsides and downsides to that. But yeah, I always find that that's kind of the thing where it's important, in a religious sense or church, kind of sense that not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, just because you're having a Catholic or a ceremony does not mean that you can't, by religion standpoint, see each other prior. I just think that, like you said, there is that grand entrance that people in their mind think that by taking that away, they won't have that. So I'm going to touch upon that a little bit about why that's not the case. And I think what we'll do is we'll give some pros and cons of either. I think it's really important to have the pros and have the cons to figure out, like you said, a lot of people know if they are not going to have it, but they don't know if they're going to have it. But in essence, it's ultimately the couple's choice about whether a first look is right for them.
100%. Don't let somebody bully you into doing anything, Right.
And it is such a hot topic. So we thought we'll break it down for you of why you should or should not do a first look. So now that we got the definition out of what a first look is, I wanted to mention that on our blog, we have an entire blog dedicated to this topic. And in the show notes, I will link up that blog. It's a blog that I probably wrote maybe about 4 months ago. So I'll link that up so people can also read the blog post that Dan and I wrote. First looks can come in a lot of different forms. You can have a first look with your spouse-to-be. You can have a first look with your mom, a first look with your dad, a first look with your bridesmaids. Dan, have you ever had a first look with groomsmen?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, hey, that's a trendsetter if someone wants to start that. But with that said, it can come in different forms. I think before we get upon the meat and the potatoes, which is the first look with your couple, let's talk a little bit about, quickly, what first looks could be with your dad, mom, family member, or bridesmaids. Basically, after you get dressed, there's that big reveal. So a first look with your bridesmaids would be, something so cute where you open up that door and all your bridesmaids are out there and they see you for the first time. And so we do that a lot. It's more that component, I feel, is more of a quicker component. It doesn't take a lot of time in your timeline and something that you can just kind of put in there if you choose to do.
And a lot of times the pictures of the reactions are very adorable, I'll say. Usually people get a little teary-eyed or something, and that's a good time to, as a photographer, get those type of reactions, which is really nice, because it's harder to obviously fake, fake that kind of stuff, but if it's genuine, it always looks really good.
I absolutely agree with that. Genuine's always best. So if they really haven't, see, this component won't really work if your bridesmaids have been with you every step of the way with dress shopping, accessory shopping. If they've already seen you in your outfit, full blown, I obviously the first look with the bridesmaids won't work. But if they haven't seen the whole ensemble put together, or maybe they weren't with you every step of the process of picking out your veil, picking out your dress, picking out your shoes, then this will be a great component for you because you will get that genuine reaction.
But not only that, it's like an excitement kind of thing. It's not always like you're looking for shock, but just like that, kind of woo-woo. It's all together,
True.
The cherry went on the sundae, kind of thing.
True.
A lot of times with dads, assuming the dad isn't there the whole time, they're seeing for the first time. A lot of times, you get a little tear out of dad, that's always a good photo op.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to say, was that the other type of first look that's out there is with mostly dad that we see, but you could be mom, or it could be uncle, or it could be someone of huge significance to you. The first look would be the reaction that you get when they see you for the first time. So as a photographer, that is something that we come in and we can help you with. So a lot of times we help, I say, stage it, meaning the reaction's not staged, but what happens prior. So you can go on our blog, you can see this really wonderful one where we got the bride coming down the stairs and you see dad at the bottom of the stairs, and it's literally the moment right before he sees his daddy's little girl on her wedding day.
And it's kind of another thing where maybe you're not thinking about the logistics of it. That's more of what we have to do. Okay, so we're thinking, okay, this area would be really good. This has a little area where you can hide, you can walk around, and in this area has good light or something like that. If that's something that's important to you, you definitely want to tell, your photographer or your videographer, and they can set that up, Maybe it's better outside, maybe it's better inside.
That's actually a really good point, Dan, because they don't have to worry about the logistics. They just have to tell us that they want to do a first look, and then we'll pretty much set it up for them. And again, it's all about you could set up something. It could be in a hallway for all we care. I mean, I've done first looks in hallways. I've done first looks in hotel rooms. I've done first looks in this beautiful open field on a beach. It doesn't really matter when it comes to that first look of your family member who's seen you for the first time. It's more about the emotion, and it's more about the feeling, and it's more about the moment. And I think that's what we all forget of why we're there, is to capture those raw feelings of emotions.
But it's the kind of thing that just needs a little bit of setup. I remember it wasn't quite a first look, but me and Sarah were on a gig, and I was with the guys, she was with the girls, and we wanted to – it wasn't a first look, but it was the hand around the corner type thing. And I was walking around looking for a place to do it, and I was actually texting you pictures of like, I think this would be a good spot, to like get the visual kind of out there. But of course, you got to sneak somebody into a corner. You got to have the other person say, okay, come down here. It's just a little bit of prep work so you know where it's coming and, to be able to capture it the proper way, and I don't know, that kind of thing.
So since we've kind of covered, Dan, first looks with bridesmaids and first looks with family members, let's get right into the meat and potatoes of first looks with your spouse. So one of the things I always tell people when they call us up and they ask us a little bit about the day and how it works with first looks is I tell them, well, first and foremost, you got to consider the time of year that you're getting married. If you are getting married after daylight savings, then you almost need to have a first look. And I say that because you literally start to lose the sun a lot of times around 3 o'clock. It's not when sunset happens, because once the sun sets, you've lost your light already for the first half an hour. You're already losing your light at that point. It's when it starts to lose the light. Because once sun sets, that means the sun's gone. That means light's gone, okay? You're now in the twilight hour, which you still need flash for that. So an off-camera flash, and that's a whole other topic. But anyway, so if you're getting married in the winter or the fall and the sun goes down earlier and you want to do outdoor photos and your ceremony's at a certain time, it's you either have indoor photos or you do a first look. Also, too, it gets a lot colder towards dusk, so sometimes doing your pictures during the early parts of the afternoon or the later parts of the morning lends yourself to be a little bit warmer outdoors. Now, if going outside is not of something that you want to do, then you don't need a first look. But just keep in mind time of year.
Well, it's being smart about where you're going to be. If, again, what Sarah was saying, if the sun goes down and we're losing outdoor light, we have to go inside or somewhere, which not to say there's not good indoor places to go. We've shot at the library and stuff like this, like different places that are beautiful inside. It's just thinking about that before you
right
before you dive in. That park that normally you'd be able to go to is going to be dark and really it would be really tough to make work. It would be better to think of a place that's like, oh, this architecture inside of this wherever,
right,
would be better.
Yeah, and the other reason why to do a first look is that sometimes you can visit a location that you wouldn't be able to do. So if you did a first look before your ceremony, you can actually go somewhere else to do your photos, where if you just did a first look during your cocktail hour is only 1 hour long. Sometimes you can get a cocktail hour for about an hour and a half at certain venues. But really, it's never longer than that, because it has a lot to do actually with liquor licenses and how long you can serve liquor in the state of Rhode Island and southern Massachusetts. So, and that's for anywhere in the states. There's always a time frame of how long you can serve liquor. So in Rhode Island, it's 5 hours consecutive. So that's why there's 4-hour receptions and 1 hour of cocktail hour. Sometimes you can do an hour and a half, which means if you do an hour and a half of cocktail hour, then all they're really doing is they're closing down the bar about a half an hour before your reception ends. So with that said, the reason why I say that is you cannot go usually off-site for photos if you're only doing photos in your cocktail hour. The formula that photographers should be explaining to you, and I'll tell you now, is it's 10 minutes on one side of the family, 10 minutes on the other side. So that's 20 minutes. 20 minutes for the bridal party, even if you only have 2 people or you have 20 people in your bridal party. And then 20 minutes with the bride and groom. However way the photographer does that, they do the bride and groom or the couple first versus the wedding party, or whether they do the family first. It doesn't matter. But the point is, that is the breakdown of the 1 hour of photos. So you want to go off site, now you have to add in travel time.
Yeah, I know. You hear all the time, oh, it's just 15 minutes down the street.
Right. But now,
does it always take 15 minutes?
So that, Dan, excellent point. So just that 15 minutes down the street, you need 2 to 5 minutes to load in, 2 to 5 minutes to load out of the car, 2 to 3 minutes to walk to the spot, 2 to 3 minutes to walk back, and then the 15 minutes there. So the drive. So I guess what people need to understand is when you're building your timelines, 15 minutes down the road is actually 40 minutes, because it's 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back. That's a half an hour. Then like 3 to 5 minutes loading in, 3 to 5 minutes loading out. There's your 40 minutes. Isn't that crazy how that adds up?
Yeah, right when you think, you have everybody loaded up, somebody has to go to the bathroom. Somebody goes, oh, I got to get the cooler. I couldn't find a place to park. If you're in the, some sort of limousine or bus kind of thing, they go real slow.
Right.
And they have to do certain things differently than other places.
Right.
They can't back in, back out. That's harder for them.
Well, on the streets of Newport, there's certain streets that they're not able to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And then also too in the city, there's a lot of one ways. So anyway, needless to say, if that explains why you get that. What's the word I'm looking for? Oh, that 1 hour for photos during cocktail hour. So if you do a first look, you can go off site. You can go somewhere. The other thing is, if you do a first look, some of the venues, and particularly the one that comes to mind is Blythewald, there's so much grounds to cover.
Variation.
And it's quite a walk to go, for example, from the mansion all the way down to the water. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you don't have the time to do that during the cocktail hour. So again, you do first look. Another thing to take in consideration about the different locations is by doing first look, is not only just, like I said, different locations, but using all the grounds on the venue, but also by having the first look, you can also do different lighting. So, for example, a lot of the times when Dan and I do first looks, we do all the pictures prior, then when you go to cocktail hour, then right at the very end of cocktail hour, if the couple would like us, we'll take them out for those twilight hour shots. So now they have these daylight shots, and now they have these twilight hour shots, where if they were just during cocktail hour, it would only be twilight hour shots. So it's just a lot of variation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's and that being said, when you say twilight, I just want to touch upon that. Everybody thinks they want like a sunset shot. Sunset works a lot of times when like there are certain clouds and stuff like that. A lot of times a night shot will knock your socks off. So
exactly. I'm glad
just a side point.
Just a side
point.
point.
Oh, we don't have a sunset. Sometimes a night shot will be real good.
So with that said, Dan, let's take a quick break, and then when we get back, I think what we're going to talk about is I'm going to go over with our listeners the domino effect that happens when you have a first look, and when after the break I'll explain what that means, and then we're also going to talk about. We'll talk about the pros of a first look, and then we'll talk about the cons. We got to talk about the cons because a first look might not be for everybody. So we'll take a quick minute break.
I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you like what you're hearing, I encourage you to check out our website at sarazarrella.com. And don't forget, you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support. And now, let's get back to the episode.
All right, well, welcome back, podcast friends. So we are here with Dan, and well, not we, it's me.
Yeah.
I know. It's me.
You're here.
You're here.
You're here with me.
I'm here with you. And we're talking about first looks. So right before the break, I talked about that we're going to talk about the pros and the cons. So let's start with the cons. The con of a first look is your spouse is not going to see you for the first time on your wedding day walking down the aisle being given away. So I think a lot of people, they don't want to take away that quote-unquote wow effect. So there's your con. Your con is the first time you see him or her will not be going down the aisle. Okay, so let's like myth bust this, for lack of better terms. I always tell people when they call that as a photographer, I am completely biased, and I'm going to tell you to do a first look for some of the various reasons that Dan and I just mentioned before the break.
We want all the time in the world. We want more time. Anytime we can get more time to do more things for you, you know, we're just all about that. But
absolutely. And also, too, it's not about just having more time. It's the fact that I generally don't want to take them away from their cocktail hour.
I feel bad about that, yeah.
I do. I just feel that, like, your wedding day is so important, and and I think that people forget why we're there. We're there for the sacrament of marriage. So we just witnessed you all giving the most important words you're going to say to each other in your lifetime together as a couple. And then all of a sudden we're pulling you away to do these fantastic photos that are very much needed and appreciated, because that's a whole other segment of why wedding day photos are not just wedding day photos, but that's a whole other segment. But the point is, why do we need to take them away from their party to get them that? So I just think as a photographer, biasly, I just say to them, I really like them to have a first look. However, take the photographer out of me. There is a con, and that con is you're not going to see your spouse for the first time walking down the aisle. But as a friend, let me tell you some things that is a pro about that. I truly feel, after doing this for so many years, and Dan, I'm sure you can say the same, there is never a moment that you are ever going to take away the first time they see you walking down the aisle. Because whether you saw each other for the first time the night before, and that means not the first time, the last time, the night before, or right before you said I do, what is the difference? And a lot of times brides will say, "Oh, I want to see. It's the first time he's going to see me in my dress." Okay. 90% of the time, the guy does not care about the dress. He cares about the woman he's marrying. So when he sees you walking down that aisle, he is not checking you out from head to toe about your dress. He's checking you out head to toe because it's you. So he will, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when the music's playing and you're being given away and you're walking down that aisle and all your friends and family are there, how could you ever replace that moment just because you saw each other an hour prior?
Well, I think you're forgetting all your guests are seeing you for the first time. You know, so
people
are seeing you for the first time, and there's a wow factor.
I didn't even think about that, Dan.
Yeah, yep.
Absolutely. So with that said, your guests are seeing you for the first time. And also, too, he's seeing you for the first time as being given away to him, or she, you know, right? So I guess I wanted to kind of debunk that a little bit, right? The other thing is the domino effect.
Well, just one more thing.
Yeah.
How many times do we hear, "Oh, it got like the jitters out"? Like I feel like more often than not, brides feel good and confident as they're walking down. How many times do we see, like, right before the bride goes down, you know, she's nervous. I think more often than not, they're not as nervous. They're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah,
after first look.
You know what, though? You brought up a really good point, because usually when we shoot together, you're with her.
Yeah.
So you see those last moments, is what we call them, the last time that she's with, you know, sometimes her father, sometimes it's her brother, or whoever's giving her away. I see him. So you brought up a good point.
Yeah.
You see those jitters go away. What I see with him is I see your spouse for the first time. Generally can have like a raw, like a real emotion. Like you can get those jitters out.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's akin to what I feel like we've been more seeing when, you know, 2020 or couples who got married low key and then had a party in 2021. You know, kind of that same thing when they're like, I just want to marry this person, you know, or like, I'm ready to rock and roll. It's a little bit of pressure relief maybe. And, you know, wedding days, not for nothing, there can be a little stressful, can be a little bit of a lot of expectations being thrown around, you know, by different people. And, you know, if one of those things can be kind of alleviated a little bit, you know, I don't know, just something to think about.
That is great points. You know, the other thing is let's talk a little bit about the domino effect, okay, that I tell people. So Here's it as a perspective just to think about. If you do a first look, one of the pros about doing the first look is what we call the domino effect. So now you can see each other. So now you just gained a few more hours on your wedding day because everybody tells you that your wedding day goes by so fast. It does. So by seeing your friends and your family prior, now when I say friends and family, sometimes the first look could just be just with you and your spouse. Sometimes people do want it with the immediate family and the bridal party to get everything out of the way. But let's just talk about it being the immediate family and bridal party, getting all the pictures out of the way prior. So by you seeing them, you just now added on 2 to 3 hours of your wedding day. So now you have a longer wedding day, which means more memories to be had. So you get a longer wedding day, then you see each other, then you do all the pictures. Now you go and you get a second raw emotion, which you just talked about, going down the aisle. Actually, back up for a second. I forgot to mention that you wanted to talk about getting the jitters out when they go down the aisle. Let's talk about the fact that I actually see more genuine emotion at a first look than I do down the aisle. A lot of times when a couple sees themselves for the first time privately, that's when you do get a tear. That's where a lot of times down the aisle, they'll stop themselves because, 150 people are staring at them. Sure. So anyway, back to the domino effect.
And you can't really talk, especially if I'm just picturing like a Catholic wedding. You're up there and, what you could say, you look good, or
right.
something,
Right.
A lot of times, another thing, we do a first look, me and Sarah, and sometimes we go like, let's step back and let them, revel in the moment. Like, we don't need to right off the bat be like, do this, do that. They're whispering in each other's ears, and we kind of back up at times. We put our cameras down and we
absolutely
give them a moment.
We give them a moment. And also, too, not only do we put our cameras down, we will capture it with our zoom lens, like really far away. And like you said, we get what we need, and then we give you a moment. And so it's amazing. So you just got 2 times throughout your day, a few hours that you see each other, a few hours added onto your day. So now the next domino effect is going back to what Dan said. Now you go into your ceremony with the jitters gone. Now you get that next moment. Now, a lot of couples, a lot of times what the bride will do is she'll do a different look. So now you get to take advantage of maybe like now you put a veil in. Now you put your hair up. Now you put a different piece in your hair. So now you have a different look you can do coming down the aisle. You don't have to do that. I'm just saying it's another option now to do that. Then you get to go to cocktail hour. So by going to cocktail hour, what you now are able to do is you don't have to go up to every single table. Now, you still can if you want to, but by you being at cocktail hour, it allows all of your guests to come up to you. You can thank them. You don't have to have a receiving line. You don't have to go up to every table at your dinner. So there's a domino effect. Now what's happening is you can go and enjoy your meal as, your first time together eating. And what you can then, you don't have to go up to every table because you've already seen everybody at cocktail hour. So now you can sit down with your spouse, enjoy that really expensive meal that you paid for on your wedding day, and then you can join your reception and dance. And every single picture is taken. You don't have to deal with that again, and you could just be merry.
Yeah. And of course, we're kind of biased in the way we look at a wedding, but I would say from the bride and groom's point of view, maybe they don't pick up on it. Maybe we're good at hiding it. But when there isn't a first look, after that ceremony is crunch time for us. So if, somebody's missing, that's, time we have to be on and get everybody together and do the things we have because we know we have an end time. We have that hour. So if, like I said, if somebody's over there chatting, that's the time where we have to say, "Oh, sorry, you got to chat later." Like this is the hour. You know what I mean? And if, like I said, if something happens, it's cutting out of that crunch time, at least for us. And if you have video as well that wants to take their own 15 minutes and stuff like that, it's just unfortunately that's the time where we sometimes say hey, we gotta be over here. We gotta do this. And that can kind of be stinky from, our point of view. Obviously, we want to go do whatever you want, but if we have a long list of things, that's the hour we got. and on the day, it's kind of funny. I always look at, the bride and groom. They're like the rock star of the day. Everybody wants to come up and talk to them, and it's funny. There have been times, I can't think of a specific time. Maybe you can, Sarah, but a time where we had to get across a group. With the bride and groom. Say like we were at point A, we got to get to point B.
That just happened last weekend.
Yeah, in the middle, there's a group of people, and we got to get the bride and groom all the way through that. And we're like, let's go around because there's no way we're going to get through this group of people. Every single person wants to stop them and say hi, which is nice to do. I'm not saying it's not nice to do. But again, when you're in that crunch time, we just know taking a rock star through a bunch of fans is not going to, it's going to be more of a waste of time than going around, whatever the venue is or something like that. We're like, we're taking the long way, which is going to save us time because, like I said, because taking the rock star through the fans isn't going to be quick.
Well, because everybody wants to talk to you, and that's why it's really nice to be at cocktail hour. Because if not, the first time they get to talk to you is at the reception, and then that's when people tell you that the wedding goes by so fast. Because before you know it, most receptions are 4 hours. Sometimes they're 5 hours long. But before you know it, after your intros happen, then everybody comes up and talks to you. You really only have about an hour and a half to 2 hours to just dance and have a good time. Mm-hmm. So, but obviously, if keeping it traditional is something that you want to do, we're there for you too. I mean, if this is not your game to do, then don't do it. But we just kind of wanted to give you some pros and cons of having a first look. Dan, why don't you share before we head out and end this segment? Don't forget, we will be back for more tips and tricks on photography. But why don't you share a little bit about what happened at your friend's wedding?
So at my friend's wedding, prefaces this. I was photographing a wedding not too long ago, and it was not military style wedding, but there was a lot of military there. And one of the things that a guest wanted to do, and he came up to me and said like, "Hey, I want to do at a cocktail hour. I want to do a thing. It's going to be cool, and you should know because you're going to want to photograph it." And I said, "Okay, great." And they did a first look, so bride and groom was at cocktail hour, and the guest had a champagne saber. So it's this like knife looking thing, and you don't cut the top of the champagne off, but you kind of slide it up, and the champagne, gets the champagne bottle top gets like blown off, and it's really kind of like a cool little like parlor trick kind of thing. And I was like, oh man, that's really cool. So my friend was getting married, and I was like, oh, I should get him one of those, and I should do the same thing. It was so cool, like a little trick to do. And then I went out to dinner with him, and I was like, I should ask him if he's having a first look or not, because nobody's going to have time to do that if that's the time for the pictures. I can't be like, oh, hey, come over here, I'm going to do a thing. Everybody's going to be like, no time for that. And later on in the night, probably it won't work either, kind of thing. But they said they're getting a first look. So I was like, okay, cool. And then I got kind of the green light because I don't want to make it all about me. I was like, hey, can I do like a cool thing, at your wedding and stuff like that? And he was like, cool. And, did it. And it's like, just like a fun little thing, and I was able to do it because of the the first look.
Yeah, and it's so, I mean, there's just so many avenues. When you, I think the con is just that people want to keep it traditional. But if you can get over that and understand that no matter what, you're never taken away when they see you for the first time. It opens up so many faucets from time of day to different locations to special things that your friends and family can now do for you that they weren't able to do for you, to enjoying your cocktail hour, to enjoying your meal, to extending your time. So with that said, I hope that this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled was able to take you guys one step closer to planning your perfect wedding. And maybe you got a little bit of thoughts and processing of whether a first look is right for you. Is there anything else you want to add, Dan, before we close out this segment?
I guess like what I would say is there's a lot of pros for a first look. But that being said, there's enough time. If you're working with a professional, they're going to be able to do things in order. If you budget the time and take into consideration, travel times and that kind of thing, there's enough time to do the normal traditional way. So, don't let that all the pros outweigh something that you want to do because there's enough time. You just got to work with a professional and, everything like that.
Yeah, and what we'll do, guys, is on our show notes, which you can catch on sarazarrella.com/podcast, we're going to have all these pros and cons so you can mull it over with your fiance. Also, too, reach out to your friends. See what they did. See their pros and cons. And then also, too, what I will do is I'm going to link on the show notes the blog that we wrote about First Looks. So hopefully this segment made it a little bit easier on your journey for a stress-free wedding planning process. And Dan and I are going to pop up again throughout the year and the next upcoming months with little tips and tricks on photography. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining me.
I'm always here.
I know you are.
But.
All right, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks on Thursday. As you all know, our podcast launches every other Thursday.
And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarazarrella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.